Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Mr. Spreadsheet Guy. Today we're going to be going over functions. So, the thing with functions in spreadsheets is there's hundreds and hundreds of functions. It would simply be impractical for you to have to Google up a YouTube video for each individual function that you want to use. So instead, I'll be showing you a very simple tool that lets you figure out exactly how the function you're trying to use works. And then I'll give you some practice with that and show you some functions which I think are cool. So, let's get into it. Firstly, to use a function, well, we have to start with an equation, so we have an equal sign, and then essentially just type in a word. And if that word is a function, then it'll show up, right? So for example, average is a function, and it gives you a little description here of what it does. And then we put in a bracket. And basically, what we need to do here is give it arguments. So what is an argument? Well, if you're familiar with coding, this should make sense. But if you're not, an argument is just any bit of information. And different functions require different bits of information. So some functions you'll want to give it a range of data values. Some you'll want to give it just one cell. Some you'd give it a true or false statement. Depending on the function, you'll need different information. And that's where the tool that I'm going to show you guys today comes in very helpful. Basically, when you're typing in a function, say the rand function, right? And you have your little open bracket here, but you don't know what's supposed to come next. You can press F1, and then it'll open up this little menu, and you can expand, and it'll tell you a little bit about it and what information it needs. So for example, with the rand function, we know that this is what it does, and we also know that it doesn't need any arguments. So we can just close it off directly. And now we have a function, and now it gives us a random value. Then we have an average function. Let's try this out here. So we type out average, and then now because we already pressed F1, this is by default open. And it'll tell you we need one value, and then we can add in as many arguments that we'd like. The minimum is just one, and this is usually a range, as it shows in the example. So, if we were to just give that as the average, and then, now we get an average. How fun. And then there's the count function. So now if we try this out with our little tool here, we'd know we need minimum one value, but we could have more. Great, right? Now, let's move on to our practice sheet. We need to use a random function to generate numbers between 1 and 20. And there's a very specific function that we can use here. And fun fact, this is the function that I've used in every single example spreadsheet until now in order to get random values to test you guys with. It's the rand between function. So, pretty self-explanatory. Rand between, it gets you a random number between two numbers. So here, it wants it 1 to 20, and then we'll type that in, and now we have a random number, right? And then we copy that down, we'll say 20 rows of that, and now we have a bunch of random numbers. One thing you need to note with random functions, you may have noticed on the previous sheet, every time you make an edit to the spreadsheet, it'll change what random numbers are there. And there's a very easy way to get around this. It's by converting this into actual text. But you may be thinking, how do we do that? Well, one thing you can do, just copy all of your data, and then you'll notice if you try and paste it somewhere else, it'll give you random numbers again. But if you paste it using Control-Shift-V, you'll notice it'll give you the exact numbers that you copied instead of completely random numbers. So, that's your little tip for the day. And now, if we go back here, Control-Shift-V, and now we have static numbers that won't change, that we generated using a random number formula. Very fun. And then what we can do is we can count the number of unique numbers in this set. And the way we do that is you'd use a count function. Just about any function, you have different functions that branch off from that function, that do a similar thing but have more steps or more limitations. Here, count unique. This is what we're looking for. what this does is, well, it counts the number of unique values in a range. So if we select this, and then we select our range, then we'll find out we have 13 unique numbers here, which is pretty interesting. So we're missing 7 unique numbers from this supposedly random data set, but I guess that's how randomness works, huh? And then now we need to count the number of numbers above 10. So very similarly, we need a count function. What we can do is we can use a count if. So most functions have an if variation. And what this does is basically it applies a restriction onto it. Usually, well, as it shows in the example, it's equals to, greater than, or less than. So we can say count if, and then we have a range, which is these guys, and then our criterion. So one other thing to note with the criterion will always be in quotations, and in this case we want greater than 10. So we'd get our greater than symbol, little crocodile, and then 10. And then we close, and then now we have 12 numbers in this set are greater than 10. And that's it for this example sheet. Now let's move on to the next example sheet, sheet 3. So this sheet is very fun. I have another cool trick for you guys. One thing you'll have a lot of if you're working with sheets a lot is you'll be working with names very often. And the thing is with names, sometimes you don't want a full name. Sometimes you want just a first name and a last name. And there's a very fun way to split them up. Very fittingly, that function is called the split function. So if we type in split, and then we open up our bracket and we have our help menu, we can see what it wants us to do. So first argument is the text, so our cell. Second argument is a delimiter. So what is a delimiter? Well, I find in this case it's most helpful to look at the example value. What they've included is a comma. See that right there? They've included a comma, and that means that the delimiter in this case likely just means the thing that separates each individual value in what we're trying to split. And in our case, that would be a space. So then we just type in a space, and then close off the bracket, because we know that the next ones are optional. This will work without, so we'll not use it. And now you'll see it's automatically used the next column as well and separated the name into first name and last name. Have fun. And now we can copy that down, and we have our names split. But sometimes you have split things and you want to rejoin them. So how do we do that? Well, we do that by doing equal sign, and then, very fittingly, this function is called the join function. So you type in join, and then delimiter, we know what that means now, so we can pick how we're going to separate these. I'll use a comma and a space bar. And then our value 1. So because we want last name then first name, we'll use the last name column and then the first name column, and then close this off, and then enter, and then now we have our names unsplit or joined. So that's it. That's the video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope you guys learned some stuff that's going to be useful in your spreadsheet work. Bye bye.